This video will help you to replace values in your configuration files smoothly. You can see that I'm trying to read the content of a template file, and after running some Python code, I see some new configuration files generated with the desired values. So that is something that you definitely want to know, because managing configuration out of your source code is always a good idea when you develop Python projects, and it is also going to be helpful to building automation for DevOps purposes. So let's go ahead and see how to template configuration files with Python. And also don't forget to hit the like button in this one. That is very helpful for taking this video one step forward in YouTube search. Let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by importing the class that will help us to handle placeholders, meaning the process of templating. So I will say from string import template like that. So now let's go ahead and start with a basic templating. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that I have a basic sentence that we will write here. Today we are learning D, and then I will use my placeholder and I will call this language, right? So I will go ahead and say today we are learning the some language, programming language, right? So that I can go ahead and always replace this one with any value that I like to. Okay, so now we should go ahead and instantiate an instance of the template class that will include which string should be templated. So that's going to be by using template and then basically pass in the sentence as the string that needs to be templated. Obviously we need to store this under a variable, so we will keep the object in Python's memory, and now we can go ahead and start doing some cool stuff here. We can go ahead and say that we'd like to substitute, meaning changing the language. So I'm going to go ahead and say that my result is going to be equal to src.substitute. Now this substitute method expects a dictionary, so allow me to start a new line here, and I'm just going to provide in a dictionary where the key is going to be just the language, because that is the placeholder that we look to replace. So I'm going to go ahead and say that language is going to be equal to Python, for example. Now this result variable will keep the updated version of the sentence. So this means that if I was to go ahead and print the result, then we will see today we are learning the Python programming language. And I can do one more variable here, one more change, and you can see that this is the result. So that is much more efficient rather than trying to replacing strings in just different way. Templating your strings in this approach should be much more helpful. Now another reason that I really like the template class, it is because it knows to handle multiple variations of placeholders that are provided in the template sentence. And what I mean by that is, let's go ahead and read the class file here. So I'm going to say Ctrl B to the class, and you can see that there is a comment that says to us that it knows to handle different variations of placeholders. And for example, if we take a look in this approach where the placeholder is given with a $sign and as well as is wrapped with curly brackets, then this is going to know how to handle it as well. So if we go ahead and use the curly brackets approach and try to go ahead and run this, then that's going to work for us as well. So sometimes when you template files or sentences, then you are going to see this approach as a placeholders that are provided in the file, and the fact that it knows to handle this as well, it is very nice. Now one more thing that you can do with the template class before we see how you can template larger files rather than a sentence, it is the fact that you can override the template's attributes so that it won't search placeholders that are starting with the $sign. It will search for placeholders that are starting with the %sign, for example. Let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So in order to see how you can do this, then I'm going to go ahead and start a new class here, and I'm going to call this my template. Now I'm obviously going to inherit from the template class to see what are the class variables that I can override. So now that we came up with this class, then I can go ahead and create this class variable which is called delimiter, which is going to just change the delimiter of the template, and the default value is obviously $sign, but I can go ahead and change this to %sign so that we will have a new delimiter. Okay, so now that we have done this, then in this line I'm going to change my class name to my template, and then I'm going to go to my sentence, and I need to address my sentence here because my placeholders are now with the percentage signs. So I'm going to change that, and I'm going to execute my program again, and you can see that it knows to handle it as well. If I take off the curly brackets, then it is also going to work, which is very nice, and it really gives you the freedom to do whatever you want to do with the template class. Just go ahead and implement the class with your own version and you are good to go. Okay, so some more tips that are good to know about the templating class. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn this into multiple line string, meaning that I'm going to make these triple quotes, and I'm going to go underneath and I'm just going to add here a sentence like I am learning this for, and then percentage sign days, right? So I want to place this with a number like 10, 15, 20, something like that. Okay, so leaving our code as it is will going to lead us to some trouble because it is going to ask for the day placeholder that was not provided in the substitute method. So substitute method expects for all the placeholders to be handled. Otherwise, it is going to raise a key error like you can see here in the console. So a good way to overcome this that you might want to consider using is the safe substitute method. This way you will not have troubles if you only want to replace one of your placeholders in the sentence. Although it doesn't much making sense in that case, but sometimes using the safe substitute is just more safe as it says in its method name. Okay, so that is something that you also want to know. Obviously, it is not going to matter to the safe substitute if you provide some of the key values or all of the key values. Now, if I go ahead and say that day is equal to 10, and intentionally I'm using an integer, so you will see that it is going to address different data types than strings, then let's go ahead and run this. You can see that it works. I am learning this for 10 days really is the second sentence here. Okay, so now we will understand how to template files and what are the best practices to do so. Now you can see that this is a YAML file, so this means that it contains structured data. If you did not hear about YAML files before, then I strongly recommend watching my YAML tutorial, which is just a short tutorial that explains what problem YAML file solves and what are their use cases. Okay, so going ahead to this program here, you can find this file, by the way, from my code snippets repository to work with it. If you go to file and string templating and to this file, you can find it. Okay, so you can see that here we have the env as a placeholder, assuming that I need a configuration for each of my environments, and I also have some IP addresses list here. Now I'm assuming that the network ID is the same for each of the IP addresses, and only the host ID, only the 4th octet in this case is going to be different, which I'm just trying to replace it with numbers between 0 to 255. Okay, so let's go to my Python file here and work from scratch how to template a file. Now I'm going to go ahead and start by reading this file. So we will go and say with open, and then we should pass the name of the file. Now here is one of the corrections that I would like to do in this case. Using a template file is something that the users of your project needs to understand. So this means that using the .template extension might be a good idea so that the users will understand that this file is intended to be changed and it is only used for read-only cases so that it will be templated to a new file, right? So this means that I can take this YAML file and I can rename it to settings.template. And I know that it will affect the syntax highlighting, but I am okay with that. Okay, so going ahead to my Python file, now we will read the settings.template. Now I will use only read-only permissions, and I will say as if, and then I will say that my source, meaning the variable of the template instance, is going to be equal to the template class, obviously, and this will be f.read because we want to read the template file. Okay, so now we can actually get out with the context manager here because it is not going to matter. It is not like an if statement. And now I can go ahead and say print src, for example, to check out if it works until now, and this works. It returns the template object. Now we can also go ahead and try to print the attribute of template, and it will give you just the original template without any changes yet, so that you know that it works. Okay, so now I can go ahead and again launch the substitute method, and obviously I want to store this inside some variable. So result is going to be equal to src.substitute, and I will allow myself to start a new dictionary here, and let's go ahead and start with the placeholders. So env is going to be dev, for example, and now we can generate a dictionary that will maintain x1, x2, and x3. So I can go ahead and say that x1 is equal to, for example, 101, and now I can try to duplicate this 2 times, right? x2 and x3, 102, 103, for example. Now obviously if your placeholder names and the values are following some pattern, then you can also use for loops. There is nothing wrong with that, but in order to save some time, I'm not doing it. Okay, so now the best way to work with this one will be just to write it to a new file that will follow up the same file name, meaning that the destination file name, so-called, is going to be settings.yaml, because that is a YAML file. Now you could also use something like that. If I'm not mistaken, you could refactor this, and you could actually say that this is a settings.yaml .template file, which will be even more making sense for the users of this program in the future. Okay, so now you can go ahead and say that you'd like to create a new file that maybe its name is going to be just settings.yaml, because that's a destination file. The extension could be only YAML, and then we will write to this file, and then I say that as if, like here in this line, and then I'm just going to say that I'd like to write the result, right? So f dot write result, simple as that. And now we have a successful templated file. If I go ahead and run this, then you can see that we have an x1 error. Okay, so that is actually good for us, because in template class you should be aware that it is case sensitive. So allow me to do one of the two here. I can go ahead and change this to x lowercase, or I can change to uppercase in the program, and we are good to go. So if I run this, then you can see that we have the settings.yaml file generated. You can see that now I have a complete configuration file for my automation, for example, right? And that is a very good way how to template a YAML file. And obviously templating has more use cases than that. You can template Ansible playbook machines, you can template Kubernetes YAML files, basically anything that requires a file as an argument to pass, and that is just a perfect way to complete the templating task for any use case. Okay, so if you enjoyed in here, please be sure to hit the like button in that video and consider subscribing to my channel so you will never miss an upload, and I will see you very soon.